The police knocked on our door around 1 o'clock in the morning while I was asleep. I awoke the next morning to hear the news. Princess said the police had come and tried to talk to Mom, but she couldn't understand them. Mom had called for Princess because she had studied it in college. The officers told Princess that our dad had been in an accident. A van had hit him while he was on his bike, and he had been taken to the hospital. At first, we all thought it must have been a minor incident, and then we saw him in the hospital. He was completely bandaged from head to foot, hooked up to all kinds of machines, with tubes and wires everywhere. His brain and spine had been damaged. He was unresponsive, in a coma, lying in a bleak hospital room that reeked of medicine. I was in disbelief. We had survived a bloody massacre and traveled to the other side of the world, only to have Dad die in America. He had done everything to get us here, to start a new life for the family and give us a future. I was so devastated. I couldn't think. I thought my heart would crack open. I couldn't imagine my life without my wise, gentle father. Hadn't we been through enough? We talked to him, telling him we loved him, hoping he could hear us. Dad, blink if you can understand us, we implored. He didn't blink. Mom had that despairing look on her face, like she did after the massacre. She prodded me to talk to him. I didn't know what to say to someone who wasn't responding. He looked dead. Hi, Dad, I said, holding his hand. I looked back at Mom, unsure what else to say. She cried and cried. While my dad lay in a coma, I had to start school. I did not allow myself to think about how my father might never wake up again. I knew that if I let my mind go there, I would not be able to function. I pushed it out of my head. My brain and my heart simply could not face it. My school that year was different from the one I had attended for those few horrible weeks in 6th grade. This school, Thomas Jefferson High, was another public school, a sprawling brick compound. It was for kids in the 7th through 12th grades, and the students were mostly immigrants and refugees. Once again, I had no friends there. Still, I knew a little more English this time around. I hoped things would go more smoothly because I had a better sense of what to expect. But no. 7th grade started out even worse than the 6th. The kids were more unfriendly. They gave me hostile looks. There was a group of girls who would ask me random questions so they could make fun of the way I spoke when I replied. They would repeat the words I said, mocking my accent and laughing hysterically. They seemed to find this game entertaining. I stopped answering their questions. I started taking English language classes, hoping that would help. But every day was a fresh hell. I hated school. Other immigrant kids got picked on too, especially Muslim girls who wore modest clothing, such as long skirts and baggy shirts. Any kids who were different became targets. At the same time, I could sense that the kids around me were hurting in their own way. Many of them seemed angry, unhappy, and poor. They didn't live in the glittery America I had imagined. They wolfed down their food in the cafeteria at lunch, as if they were starving, and I realized they probably had little food at home. But I didn't see why they felt a need to be so mean to me. I went home anxious and upset at the end of each day. But I couldn't talk to my mom about it, because she wasn't familiar with my new environment. And she had tremendous problems of her own, working in the grueling factory by day and visiting my dad at night. We went to the hospital to see him every evening. His condition remained unchanged. We would say a few words to him, then sit there for hours. The doctors never gave us good news. All we heard was, no changes, no changes. Sometimes church members would stop by and pray. Over the weeks, the doctors began asking my mom if they should pull the plug. His chances of waking up grew slimmer. Mom said no. At home, my siblings and I had to help Mom figure out the bills because she was busy working and didn't have time to learn English. She needed our help to translate. I was getting better at English. Sometimes it felt like I was the parent, teaching her things. It was all too much. I grew angry at the world, furious at God. I lost my faith. I decided there was no God, and that everything my parents had told me about him was a lie. I thought no one loved us, and no one cared, least of all God. My family was falling apart. People from church would ask, "How are you doing?" I hated that question. How were we doing? We were doing terribly. I listened to people praying to God and thought, "You're all fools. God won't help you." I decided I would never go to church again. I told myself that if my dad died, I would not cry. I would stop feeling anything at all. I was very angry. I hated my life. School continued to be a minefield, with kids shunning and mocking me, and I dreaded going there every day. There was one girl named Chantel who tried to talk to me, but she spoke so fast I could hardly understand her. She was from Tanzania, but had managed to assimilate into American culture, as she had been in the States for about 3 years. She seemed confident and brash. She covered her hair with a headscarf and wore modest skirts, in keeping with her cultural roots, but she spoke English in a way that sounded American. She sounded like the African American kids. In other words, the black kids from America. I was quickly learning that I was not considered African American, even though I was from Africa and I was living in America. My words came out sounding different from theirs. In fact, as I began to learn and speak more English, the African American kids started accusing me of sounding white, and they did not consider this to be a good thing. I didn't understand the difference between black and white. Growing up in Congo, being black was not an issue for me. My skin color was something I never thought about. I didn't understand why sounding white would be considered bad among black kids, or even what it meant to sound white. No one was teaching me how to speak English one way or the other, black or white. I wondered if I would ever learn to talk the right way, and I wondered what the right way was. 7th grade was the first year when I realized how far from home I had come, and how far I had to go to learn my new world. I didn't talk about it much with my siblings. We were all trying to work through our own challenges. Everything was new to all of us. I'll never forget Adele's experience with culture shock at a high school track meet. She was set to run in a competition, and then a gun went off to mark the start of the race. No one had told her to expect a gunshot. She thought someone was shooting at people. She ran off the field. As for me, at least one thing was going my way. My hair was finally growing longer, so I could start braiding it and shed the scratchy wig. I tried my best to block out the angst, the kids at school, my dad in the hospital, and focus on my studies. I did well in my classes, especially in math and science, which confounded some of the other kids, since my English was still raw. I kept plugging away at the language, and my English language teacher, Mrs. Koji, took a personal interest in me. She truly cared about her students and got to know them personally. She saw how hard I worked with my studies and how I struggled to fit in socially, and then she did something special for me. She helped me apply to a private Catholic girls' school, Our Lady of Mercy, for the 8th grade. I went to Mercy to take an admissions test. The school was a different world from Jefferson, with a leafy campus straight from a movie. The main building looked like a castle, surrounded by a sprawling lawn of freshly cut grass. The girls wore uniforms and looked confident and content. I was intimidated. As much as I despised Jefferson, at least I was in the same boat as my fellow students, who were mostly poor like me. Still, the prospect of going to Mercy excited me. I had a flash of hope, but I remained angry at the world.